The Centauri exhibition hall's crystalline dome sparkled under the twin suns of Proxima b, its transparent panels refracting rainbow patterns across the gathering of Earth's finest botanical minds. Dr. Maya Patel stood at the front of the human delegation, her dark eyes scanning the enormous atrium, where species from across the galaxy had gathered for the 847th Galactic Botanical Congress. "Remember," she whispered to her team, "we're about to change everything they think they know about biological diversity." Her fingers tightened around the data tablet containing Earth's registration documents. Behind her, 300 of humanity's top agricultural scientists and botanists waited, each carrying specialized containers housing their contributions. The registration desk loomed ahead, staffed by a towering exarchesian, a being that resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a sequoia tree. Its iridescent exoskeleton shifted colors as it processed applications from various species. Each alien delegation approached with their single plant specimen, following the Congress's most sacred rule: one species per participating civilization. Next, the exarchesian's melodious voice called out. Maya stepped forward, her heart pounding against her ribs. This moment would either mark humanity's greatest botanical triumph or their most embarrassing diplomatic incident. "Registration for Earth delegation," Maya announced, her voice steady despite her nerves. "We bring our submission of Brassica oleracea." The exarchesian's compound eyes flickered with interest. "Proceed with specimen presentation." Maya turned and nodded to her team. As one, they began approaching the registration desk. Container after container, scientist after scientist. The exarchesian's color shifted rapidly from a peaceful green to an alarmed orange. "There appears to be a misunderstanding," it chittered. "The rules clearly state one species." Maya completed the sentence, activating her tablet's holographic display. "And we have complied. Every plant we bring today is Brassica oleracea. Same species, different expressions." The hologram expanded, showing genetic markers and DNA sequences. As the exarchesian's assistants rushed forward to verify the data, the human delegation began opening their containers. Out came cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, kale, and countless other variations, all members of the same species. "Impossible," whispered a nearby Andromedan observer, its gas-filled observation bubble vibrating with excitement. "How can one species manifest in so many forms?" Maya smiled, launching into the explanation she had rehearsed countless times. "On Earth, we discovered that species aren't limited to single expressions. Through careful selection over generations, we learned to guide natural variation into forms that benefit different needs and preferences." The exarchesian's color had shifted to a deep purple of confusion. More aliens gathered around, drawn by the commotion. Maya noticed several of them, recording the scene with various devices, exactly as she had hoped. "But the purpose of the one-species rule," the exarchesian began, its voice wavering, "is to maintain order, to prevent chaos in agricultural systems." "With respect," Maya countered, pulling up historical Earth agricultural data, "we found that diversity within species actually strengthens agricultural systems. Each variation adapts to different conditions, resists different threats, provides different nutrients. It's not chaos, it's resilience." A murmur rippled through the gathered aliens. Maya caught snippets of translated conversations, shock, disbelief, and most importantly, curiosity. She gestured to her team to continue their setup, watching as they arranged Earth's botanical achievement into a stunning display of shapes, colors, and sizes. "Consider this," Maya continued, addressing the growing crowd. "When disease strikes one variation, others might resist. When climate changes challenge one form, another thrives. This isn't just about variety. It's about survival." The exarchesian was rapidly consulting with other Congress officials, their chittering conversation just beyond Maya's translator's range. She used the moment to organize her team's final presentation elements, knowing that what happened next would determine humanity's place in galactic agriculture. Finally, the exorcism turned back to her, its color now a contemplative blue. Dr. Patel, your delegation's interpretation of the rules is unprecedented. The Congress will need to convene an emergency session to discuss this development. Maya nodded, anticipating this response. Of course, while the Congress deliberates, might we suggest a demonstration? We've prepared comparative tastings of each variation, along with detailed nutritional analyses and growing conditions. Finally, the exorcism turned back to her, its color now a contemplative blue. Dr. Patel, your delegation's interpretation of the rules is unprecedented. The Congress will need to convene an emergency session to discuss this development. Maya nodded, anticipating this response. Of course, while the Congress deliberates, might we suggest a demonstration? We've prepared comparative tastings of each variation, along with detailed nutritional analyses and growing conditions. The crowd's attention shifted noticeably at the mention of tastings. Even the most skeptical aliens moved closer to the human delegation's display. Maya smiled inwardly. She had counted on curiosity overcoming convention. As her team began setting up the sampling stations, Maya caught a glimpse of something unexpected. Young alien botanists taking notes, their appendages moving furiously across various recording devices. Seeds of change, she thought, had already been planted. The first part of humanity's mission, causing a stir, had succeeded. Now came the harder part, convincing the galaxy that Earth's agricultural revolution could benefit everyone. Maya squared her shoulders and prepared for the next phase of their carefully planned disruption of galactic botanical tradition. The emergency session of the Galactic Botanical Congress had been running for 6 standard hours. Maya stood at the center of the vast amphitheater, surrounded by tier upon tier of alien delegates. The air was thick with a mixture of atmospheric conditions to accommodate the diverse species present, creating a slight haze that made the furthest observers appear as mere shadows. "What you propose is dangerous," declared Ambassador Zix 427, a crystalline being from the Orion system. Their fractalized surface reflected the chamber's lights in agitated patterns. "Our agricultural systems are built on predictability, on careful control." Maya gestured to the holographic display floating above the chamber's center. "With respect, Ambassador, Earth's history shows the opposite. Our agricultural revolution began when we embraced variation, not when we restricted it." The display shifted, showing the evolution of wild cabbage into its numerous cultivars. Behind her, Dr. James Rodriguez, Earth's leading agricultural historian, stepped forward with supporting data. 10,000 Earth years ago, he began, our ancestors began selecting plants with desirable traits. They didn't understand genetics or DNA, but they understood that nature provided options. What you see as chaos, we see as opportunity. A ripple of translation devices echoed through the chamber as his words were conveyed in hundreds of languages. From the upper tiers, a Medusan observer extended their sensory tendrils, their usual violet hue shifting to a curious green. "But your method requires constant adaptation," the Medusan noted. "Our systems are stable, reliable. Reliable until they fail catastrophically," Maya countered. She nodded to her assistant, Dr. Aisha Wong, who brought up new data. Earth's agricultural history includes numerous examples of crop failures due to lack of diversity. The Irish potato famine, the Panama disease in bananas, these were disasters caused by over-reliance on single varieties. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Maya pressed her advantage, bringing up images of Earth's seed vaults. "We learned to preserve diversity not just as a cultural choice, but as a survival strategy. Every variation we create is an insurance policy against future challenges." From the procedural committee, the exorcism chief administrator raised an appendage. "The Congress must consider the regulatory implications. If we accept Earth's interpretation, other species will demand similar freedoms." "Good," Maya said firmly, drawing surprised clicks and whistles from the audience. "Innovation shouldn't be Earth's exclusive domain. Every species here has the potential to explore their agricultural heritage in new ways. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward again, his weathered face earnest. We're not here to replace your methods, but to add to them. Think of it as expanding your agricultural portfolio. The debate continued, but Maya noticed a shift in the chamber's energy. More species were asking practical questions about implementation rather than arguing against the concept. Young botanists from various species had moved to the lower tiers, their recording devices capturing every detail of Earth's presentation. During a brief recess, Maya found herself surrounded by a group of alien agricultural students. A young exarchesian, their exoskeleton still showing the pearlescent sheen of youth, raised an appendage. Dr. Patel, could this approach be applied to other species? Not just plants, but... They trailed off, clearly worried about breaking some unspoken taboo. Maya smiled encouragingly. The principles of selective breeding and trait expression are universal. Every living thing contains the potential for variation. The implications of her words spread through the group like ripples in a pond. Maya watched as the students began furiously comparing notes, their excitement palpable. This, she realized, was where real change would begin, not in the formal proceedings above, but in the minds of the next generation. As the session resumed, Maya noticed several senior botanists engaged in intense discussions with their human counterparts. Dr. Wong was explaining cellular modification techniques to a fascinated group of Andromedan researchers, while Dr. Rodriguez had drawn a crowd with his historical documentation of Earth's agricultural development. The exarchesian chief administrator called for order, their color now a thoughtful shade of blue-green. The Congress requires time to process this information and consider its implications. But they paused, their compound eyes focusing on Maya. We cannot ignore the potential benefits of Earth's methods. Maya nodded respectfully, but inside she was celebrating. They hadn't won approval yet, but they had achieved something more valuable. They had made the galaxy curious. As the session adjourned for formal deliberations, she watched dozens of informal discussion groups form, mixing species and generations in ways the Congress had never seen before. Dr. Patel called out the young exarchesian from earlier. Would you be willing to share more detailed documentation of your breeding programs? Of course, Maya replied, trying to contain her excitement. In fact, we brought complete records of our agricultural history, including our failures. Sometimes knowing what doesn't work is as valuable as knowing what does. The news spread quickly. Earth was offering not just their successes, but their mistakes as well. It was unprecedented in a society where species guarded their agricultural secrets jealously. As Maya watched the reaction spread through the crowd, she knew they had just changed the game entirely. The seeds of change had not just been planted. They were already beginning to sprout. The third day of the Galactic Botanical Congress brought storm clouds, both literally and figuratively. The Centauri exhibition hall's crystalline dome darkened under purple-tinged clouds, while inside, the atmosphere was equally turbulent. Maya found herself facing not just scientific skepticism, but political opposition. The Thoraxian Confederation formally protests Earth's presence at this Congress, announced Ambassador Krill, their chitinous armor gleaming under the emergency lights. Their methods threaten the very foundation of galactic agriculture. Maya stood at her delegation station, watching as a crowd gathered around the Thoraxian representative. She had expected resistance, but the intensity of the opposition surprised her. This isn't just about rules, Krill continued, their translator struggling to convey the full range of their clicking speech. Earth's approach could destabilize centuries of carefully maintained agricultural balance. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain. Ambassador, if I may. You may not, Krill interrupted. We have reviewed Earth's agricultural history. Your species has a pattern of reckless experimentation. The Irish potato famine you mentioned, a direct result of your manipulation of natural order. Maya felt her temper flare, but Dr. Wong's gentle touch on her arm helped her maintain composure. They had prepared for this, opposition rooted in fear rather than facts. "Ambassador," Maya said, her voice carrying across the now silent hall, "you're absolutely right about the potato famine. It was a devastating example of what happens when we rely on too little diversity, not too much. It's precisely why we developed these methods." She gestured to their display, where dozens of brassica varieties flourish under carefully controlled conditions. Each variation is an insurance policy against disaster. When disease struck our potato crops, it was devastating because we had relied on too few varieties. We learned from that mistake. From the crowd, a new voice spoke up. It was Zenra, a respected agricultural theorist from the Pleiades system. "The Thoraxian Confederation raises valid concerns about stability, but perhaps we should examine Earth's data more closely before dismissing their methods." The hall's atmosphere shifted as Zenra approached Earth's display. Their species was known for careful, methodical evaluation rather than emotional responses. Maya nodded to Dr. Wong, who began pulling up their most detailed research data. "We've documented every step of our breeding programs," Dr. Wong explained, her quiet confidence drawing listeners closer, "including failure rates, genetic drift calculations, and stability matrices across generations." Zenra's multiple eyes blinked in sequence as they absorbed the information. "Fascinating. Your species appears to have developed a systematic approach to controlled variation. This isn't chaos, it's calculated diversity." The young exerxegian from the previous day pushed forward through the crowd. "I've been studying their methods overnight," they announced, their exoskeleton shimmering with excitement. "Earth's approach actually increases stability through redundancy. Each variation provides backup systems for the others." Ambassador Krill's color darkened. "You're too young to understand the implications." "Perhaps," the young exerxegian interrupted, earning gasps from their elders, "or perhaps we're just not too old to learn new methods." Maya watched as more young botanists joined the discussion, their questions becoming more technical and specific. They weren't just accepting Earth's methods, they were already thinking about applications for their own species' agriculture. "Consider this," Maya said, addressing the entire hall. "Every species here developed through natural selection, a process that favors diversity. We simply learn to guide that process rather than restrict it." Dr. Rodriguez activated a new holographic display, showing the evolution of various Earth crops. "Our ancestors didn't invent diversity. They discovered it. Nature had been experimenting for billions of years before we began our work." The display shifted to show parallel examples from other worlds, variations in alien crops that had emerged naturally. "Every species here has the same potential. We're not asking you to abandon your methods, we're offering to help you expand them." As the debate continued, Maya noticed something remarkable. The division in the room wasn't between species anymore, it was between approaches to the future. Young botanists from traditionally opposed species were clustering together, sharing ideas and possibilities, while conservatives from various species found common ground in their resistance. "This is how it begins," Dr. Wong whispered to her, "not with universal acceptance, but with the right people asking the right questions." Maya nodded, watching as the young exerxegian led a group of their peers in a detailed analysis of Earth's breeding programs. They were no longer just listening. They were planning, adapting the principles to their own world's needs. Ambassador Krill and their supporters continued their protests, but their voices were increasingly drowned out by the buzz of excited technical discussions. The future of galactic agriculture wasn't going to be decided by political declarations. It would be shaped by the scientists and botanists who were already imagining new possibilities. As the artificial day cycle began to dim, Maya realized that they had crossed a crucial threshold. The controversy wasn't about whether Earth's methods would spread anymore. It was about how quickly and in what form they would be adapted across the galaxy. The fourth day of the Congress brought an unexpected development. Maya arrived at the exhibition hall to find the space completely reorganized. The traditional species-segregated displays had been abandoned in favor of collaborative zones, each focused on different agricultural challenges. Your methods are causing quite the revolution, Zenray observed, gliding up beside her, though perhaps not in the way anyone expected. Maya watched as mixed species teams worked together, sharing knowledge and techniques. The young exarxegian, who had introduced themselves as XL, was leading a workshop on applying Earth's selective breeding principles to crystalline-based life forms. "We never intended to simply transplant Earth's methods," Dr. Wong explained to a gathered group. "The principle is about understanding and working with natural variation, whatever form it takes." In one corner, Dr. Rodriguez had set up an impromptu historical archive, documenting the parallel development of agriculture across different worlds. "Look at these patterns," he enthused, pointing to similarities in how different species have begun cultivating food. "We all started with the same basic challenge: feeding our people." The atmosphere in the hall had transformed. Where there had once been careful diplomatic distance between species, now there was animated collaboration. Even some of the previous day's opponents were cautiously participating in technical discussions. Dr. Patel called a Medusan botanist, their sensory tendrils swaying with excitement. "We've been applying your diversity principles to our fungal networks. The preliminary results are fascinating." Maya joined their group, where holographic displays showed experimental results from rapid cycle testing. The Medusans had taken Earth's principles and adapted them to their unique biology, creating variations that could thrive in different atmospheric conditions. "This is exactly what we hoped for," Maya said, studying their data. "You're not just copying our methods, you're evolving them." Ambassador Krill observed from the sidelines, their opposition now tempered by curiosity. Maya approached them carefully, carrying samples of Earth's most successful hybrid crops. "Ambassador," she began, "would you be willing to share your concerns about implementation? Your experience with large-scale agricultural systems could help us avoid potential pitfalls." The Thoraxian's antennae twitched in surprise at the respectful invitation. After a moment's hesitation, they moved closer to examine the samples. "Our primary concern has been stability," they admitted. "Our systems support billions. Exactly why diversity is crucial," Maya explained. "Let me show you how we manage large-scale implementation while maintaining security." As she walked the ambassador through Earth's agricultural safety protocols, more conservative representatives began joining the discussion. They weren't ready to embrace all of Earth's methods, but they were engaging with the possibilities. Dr. Wong had begun a detailed exchange with Andromedan biochemists, exploring how Earth's principles could be applied to gas-based agriculture. "The fundamental concepts remain the same," she explained. "It's about understanding and working with natural variation, regardless of the medium." In another section of the hall, the young botanists had organized a cross-species tasting session. Earth's various brassica cultivars were being sampled alongside similar vegetables from other worlds, creating a literal fusion of agricultural traditions. "The flavors are remarkably complementary," noted a crystalline being, their surface reflecting patterns of pleasure. "Perhaps our culinary traditions are not so different after all." Maya smiled, remembering how Earth's own cuisines had evolved through cultural exchange. "Food has always been one of the best ways to bring people together," she said. As the day progressed, the exhibition hall became a hub of innovation. Species that had never directly collaborated were sharing research data, comparing growing techniques, and planning joint experiments. The young exarxesians group had already produced preliminary proposals for adapting Earth's methods to 20 different biological systems. "We're calling it the Galactic Agricultural Innovation Network," XL announced proudly, displaying their project outline, "a platform for sharing knowledge and techniques across species." Maya watched as their presentation drew interest from both young and established botanists. The network they proposed would transcend traditional species boundaries, creating a new framework for agricultural cooperation. "There will still be challenges," Dr. Rodriguez reminded her quietly. "Change this fundamental doesn't happen overnight." "No," Maya agreed, "but look at what's already happening. They're not just accepting new ideas, they're making them their own." The artificial day was drawing to a close, but the exhibition hall remained buzzing with activity. Species that had never shared agricultural information were now planning long-term collaborations. The rigid structure of the Congress had given way to something more organic, more dynamic. The final day of the Galactic Botanical Congress dawned with all three of Proxima B's moons visible through the crystal dome. Maya stood with her team at the center of the exhibition hall, surrounded by the results of their week's work. But the display before them was no longer just Earth's achievement. It had become something far more significant. The Congress calls this special session to order, announced the Exergzation Chief Administrator, their exoskeleton shimmering with formal colors. We have arrived at a historic moment in galactic agricultural development. The hall was packed with representatives from every participating species. Even those who had initially opposed Earth's methods were present, their attention focused on the unprecedented proposal before them. The formation of the Galactic Agricultural Innovation Institute, the administrator continued, represents a fundamental shift in how we approach cultivation across our worlds. Maya watched as XL, now appointed as the Institute's first junior director, stepped forward to present the final framework. The young Exergzation's proposal had evolved far beyond their initial concept, incorporating input from dozens of species. "We stand at a crossroads," XL began, their voice clear and confident. "We can cling to isolation, or we can embrace the power of shared innovation. Earth showed us that diversity within species is strength. Now we understand that diversity between approaches, between cultures, between worlds, that is our greatest strength of all." The holographic display activated, showing the Institute's first planned projects. Among them was a massive seed bank that would preserve variations from every member species, a genetic library unprecedented in galactic history. Ambassador Krill, who had once led the opposition, raised their appendage. "The Thoraxian Confederation has reviewed the safety protocols and implementation strategies. They paused, antennae twitching. "We wish to contribute our own agricultural archives to the Institute's database." A murmur of excitement rippled through the hall. The Thoraxians were known for their secretive approach to agricultural technology. Their willingness to share marked a profound shift in galactic cooperation. Dr. Wong stepped forward, her quiet voice carrying unexpected authority. "Each variation we preserve is a possibility we protect. Each technique we share is a future we safeguard. Together, we're not just maintaining our agricultural heritage, we're ensuring its evolution." The display shifted to show the first successful cross-species applications of Earth's principles. The Medusins' adapted fungal networks were already showing promising results in hostile environments. Androndan gas-based agriculture had achieved unprecedented stability through controlled variation. "We've already seen the beginning," Maya addressed the assembly. "But this is about more than agriculture. This is about recognizing that progress doesn't have to mean abandoning tradition. It means building upon it, allowing it to grow and adapt." Zenra glided forward, their multiple eyes reflecting the holographic light. "The Pleiades system proposes an addition to the Institute's charter. We suggest establishing a mentorship program, pairing experienced botanists with students from different species. Let us ensure this knowledge flows not just between worlds, but between generations." The proposal was met with immediate support, particularly from the younger botanists who had been at the forefront of this transformation. Maya watched as XL quickly began organizing the first mentorship pairs, their enthusiasm infectious. "The Congress recognizes," the chief administrator announced, "that we are witnessing not just a change in agricultural practice, but in how our species interact. The Institute will serve as more than a repository of knowledge. It will be a bridge between worlds." As the formal vote began, Maya felt Dr. Rodriguez's hand on her shoulder. "Did you ever imagine," he whispered, "that we'd achieve so much more than we planned?" Maya shook her head, watching as species after species registered their support for the Institute. Their original goal, Gaining acceptance for Earth's agricultural methods seemed almost modest now compared to what had emerged. The final vote was nearly unanimous. As the chief administrator officially chartered the Galactic Agricultural Innovation Institute, the hall erupted in a cacophony of celebration in dozens of different forms. Chemical signals, light patterns, sound waves, and more, all expressing the same joy in their own unique ways. Dr. Patel, XL approached, their exoskeleton glowing with achievement. The Institute's first official action will be to establish experimental stations on 20 worlds, implementing adapted versions of Earth's diversity principles. Would you and your team consider serving as technical advisors? Maya looked at her team. Dr. Wong's quiet smile, Dr. Rodriguez's enthusiastic nod, and knew their work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. We would be honored, she replied. After all, this is no longer just Earth's project. It belongs to all of us now. As the celebration continued around them, Maya gazed up through the crystal dome at the stars above. Somewhere out there, on countless worlds, the next generation of botanists was already preparing to write the next chapter in this unexpected story. They had come to share Earth's agricultural revolution, but they had sparked something far greater, a revolution in how species could work together, grow together, and face the future together. The seeds they had planted had grown into something more beautiful and more powerful than any single world could have achieved alone. And this was just the first harvest of many to come.